So welcome and thanks for coming. First of all, we'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people who are the traditional owners of the land. We'd also like to pay respects to elders, both past and present, of the Eora Nation, and extend that respect to other Indigenous Australians who are present. My name's Gerry Neustatl, and I'm one of the Sydney Web Accessibility and Inclusive Design Meetup organisers, along with Sarah, Stuart and Lily. Guys, can you put up your hand? Excellent, thanks. Any questions that you have at any time, maybe later on in the evening, if you've got general questions about accessibility, definitely have a chat to us. I'm also the ABC's accessibility subject matter expert, and I'm honoured to be part of this great institution that we have that values the breadth of human diversity enough to actually have me on staff, which is great. My team wanted me to dress appropriately for this evening. I hope I am dressed appropriately. Is this okay for you guys? No? Okay. Well, they also said I should wear this, just so that you know who I am and what it is that I actually do. Oh goodness, there's always got to be someone with a camera, doesn't there? All right, thanks also to the ABC for putting on this event today. In particular, Lisa Bacon, who's the head of audiences, and Linda Bracken, who is the head of content and digital. So the question that we're asking today, I'm going to hold this up so I can look at you as well. Question that we're asking today is, what does it actually mean to be accessible first? It means considering the needs of people with a disability from the ground up of any product. And this is really important to the ABC because the ABC is the people's media. The ABC is owned by the people, and we want all of our products to be usable by everyone, regardless of ability. But it doesn't stop there. Accessible products make smart business sense. Why do they make smart business sense? Because they help the ABC to compete in an aggressive media landscape for audience. But it's not just our apps that should be accessible. In fact, it's not just government apps that should be accessible. A lot of people will come to you and say, well, you know, it needs to be accessible because it's government. That's not the case. All apps should be accessible because accessible apps are easier to understand. They help you get your message across to more people, to make a difference, to get more eyes on your product, more eyes on your services, and to get your message across. Accessible apps simply are just better. They're just smart business. So these days, most of us really love our smartphones and tablets. The ABC makes a whole lot of apps for this. Some of them you may be aware of. There's the Listen app, which is an audio app. iView is great for catch-up TV. And the ABC app. The ABC app is a really popular news app. Some of you may have seen it on some devices on the table at the back of the room. If you haven't, have a look later on. The ABC app, popular news app, it's built for ease, it's built for usability, and it's built to be accessible from the ground up. The mobile app technological environment changes very, very rapidly. Think about your phones and tablets. Do they work the same as they did a year ago? No. How many new features have been added just in the past 12 months? Heaps. Mobile app accessibility techniques and features also change rapidly. And this creates both challenges and exciting opportunities for developers of apps. I was talking with a colleague the other day. I loved a couple of words that she hit me with. What if? What if I have limited vision? How can I operate this podcast? What if I have a sprained wrist? The ABC has some super committed innovators who never stop asking questions like, what if? And before I introduce them, your questions are very, very valuable. We want to know what they're all about, but can you please hold them off till the end? So without further ado, please welcome Arun, Senior iOS Developer, and Wei, Senior Android Developer. And they'll tell you about how we go about making accessible first mobile apps.
Thank you. Thanks, Gerry. Thanks. So first of all, thank you so much for coming here. Thank you so much for your time. My name is Arun. I'm a senior iOS engineer. This is my friend and colleague, Wei. She's a senior Android engineer. We work for the ABC mobile team. So this is what's going to happen tonight. Right. We're going to give you a bit of a background about who we are. And then this talk going to have two distinct sections. One is about the process. The second one is completely separate one, which is where we're going to dive into the technical side of it. So two distinct sections, process and tech. So one of the best things about working with the ABC is we get to work with amazing content. We got great journalists, right? Amazing stories, right? And we get to take them to all the people. And these journalists write stories for all Australians from an Australian perspective. Now, apps are a new conduit that takes this content to a lot of people. So the responsibility falls to the 9-member mobile team, sits in the technology division, to make sure this app is accessible for everyone.
OK. Now let's talk about, in order to make our app accessible for everyone, who are the enablers? First, of course, we need our UX and UI designers, like Emma. So who understand what does accessibility mean for mobile apps? And of course, engineers who understand, who know how to implement accessibility features on both iOS and Android platforms. And of course, we need accessibility subject matter experts like Gerry in ABC to tell us how people actually use our app. And he can make very valuable suggestions to the mobile team. If that's all, the answer is no. So we need our managers' support. We need them to say to all of us to say, accessibility is a non-negotiable thing for all of our apps. So that's a little bit of background of what we are doing. And later, Arun is going to talk about the process.
So at ABC, our mobile team works in 2-week sprints. When we are building this ABC News app, we are learning as we are going through. So I'm going to use 3 features that we implemented and how we brought these enablers together at the earliest stages of building these features, how it enabled us to create an accessible app. So I'm going to use those 3 examples first. I'm going to start with this first one, right? This is an onboarding feature. It has 3 screens. First one is a welcome screen, and then it takes them to a notification permission for breaking news. And then it takes them to a screen where there are topics that people can select so that they can tailor their home feed. So that 3 basic screens. When we went to designing this thing, right, at the very early stages, only the designers, product, and the engineers came together. We hashed out, OK, this is how it's going to be. Look, this is what it's going to do. And we thought it is accessible. Went into development, and then we did the software verification, and then we did a design review, and then we released the app. After that, we took the app to our subject matter expert, right? And then he straight away picked it up. I don't think this swiping is going to get people. I don't think they're going to get to the second stage. I think most of them are going to stuck at the first screen. User testing verified it, validated it, and we're also getting feedbacks from the field saying that, I can't get past the first screen. How do I go to the next screen? I'm stuck on your new app. Yeah. So he also suggested what we can do. Right. Just put a button over there. People are not able to read that swipe to get started. Even though there are dots over there, people are not going to find it out. Right? So simple. Just put a button over there. And that's how we did. We just slapped a button over there. There we go. Solve the problem. That's it.
So with the listen and learn from the original process, This what we think. If we want to capture the potential accessibility bug earlier, what we should do? We should bring our subject matter expert earlier into the design phase, right? So we improved our process a little bit. Let me share an example to see how this process helped us build a better user experience for our app. So one day, here comes a design, comes a feature, Emma shared to me. We're going to have a user feedback card, and we're going to ask a user one question, and after user give us a response to press the button, and we will play a very nice animation. After that, the user feedback card, the whole thing, will just disappear from the screen. It's a very nice design. I like it. I didn't see any problem with it. But here comes our expert. Gerry told me that just be careful. Everything that would disappear from your screen automatically without letting user know what happened might have issue, because people using our app, they maybe cannot see our screen, right? They maybe just get lost if anything just disappeared. That's a big issue. All right, here comes another design. Simply add a close button on top of it. So we give back the control to the user, so they can control, they know where they are and what they're going to do. So that's how the new process helped. We improved our user experience on our app.
So we have seen two examples so far, right? First one, we didn't include the subject matter expert in the early stages of our design process, or starting point. It came back and bite us. And second one, it helped us to caught the issue at the very beginning, right? So it helped. Thus, even though you have subject matter expert at the beginning, still something will leak through, right? Let's look at this one. We all came together, designer, subject matter expert, UX designers, developers, co-designed it. There we go, we got this, right? Nice live stream, perfect, no problem at all, working fine, mocked it up, everything worked fine. Went through the cycle again, perfect, right? But the yellow thing over there, I'm going to tell you what that is. We didn't do it, right? I'm going to tell you later what it is, right? Put it before for the user testing. The yellow thing is nothing but user testing, right? There are certain sections of the user tend to use the zoom feature of your screen, right? We didn't expect that. And the way these experienced accessibility users scan through the thing was, they just go through that like that. They go through that, whatever the thing on the left-hand side of the corner. They skim through, and they missed the actual actionable items over there, which is whether to play or listen. So they basically missed it. So our user testing helped us to move the button from there to here. This is how we solved it. So what we learned from here, when we are doing user testing, we need to involve people of all abilities, of all spectrum. That helps us to identify all these things. Now, I'm going to stop here talking about process, because this process is continuously evolving. This is something that we did in the 3 sprints that happened in the Neustatl. But over there in level 3, we are continuously finding out how to bring these multiple enablers, the multidisciplinary team, together at the very beginning of the designing of a feature or an app, so that it helps us to build an app that is able, that makes everyone of all abilities to use. So this process is continuously evolving at ABC. Maybe someday we come back and talk more about it. Now I'm going to dive into the tech. How many developers do we have here? Good, awesome, great. So I'm going to start talking about this iOS system first, right? The iOS system has 3 layers, right, when you want to do the accessibility. At the bottom, you have the operating system. And then in the middle, you got this powerful framework called your UI accessibility framework. It does a lot of heavy lifting. It simplifies a lot of the questions that the operating system is going to ask the your app because it's going to be shunted through this UI accessibility framework, and it enables your app to work with different accessible devices. So this one is one of the most powerful things, and it also simplifies the amount of work this app is going to do. Now, operating system is going to fire a bunch of questions to the framework. Framework depends on what it can do. It's going to ask some questions to the app, and then app going to respond back to the framework, and the framework will going to respond it back to the operating system. Look, iOS accessibility, implementing accessibility in iOS is so simple. All you need to do is just answer 6 questions. That's all you need to do. In some cases, you don't need to answer all those 6 questions, because this UI accessibility framework will do a lot of heavy lifting for you. Here it is. I'm going to explain that using how we make this button accessible. So this is one of the Edit Home button, where you can modify the topics in your home screen. So I'm going to explain this using this as an example. What do we do? How are we going to make this button accessible? The very first question the framework is going to ask your app is this element accessible? You're going to respond back yes or no. If you say no, that's it, end of story. But if you say yes, it's going to come back with the next question. What's your name? So that the operating system can announce it. What name is it? In this case, I would say it's an Edit Home. So basically, I work with my UX engineer, UX designer, to find out what's the best way to say those kind of things. What's your name? So once you answer this question, there will be a third question. What role does this element plays? Is it a button? The answer will be, is it a button? Or is it a static text? Is it an image? Or is it something that holds a value like text box? So there are a bunch of roles that you can respond back to. In this case of the button, and since I used the system framework provided button, since it's not a custom button, just answering these 3 questions is enough for the UI accessibility framework to make this button really accessible. That's it. Super simple. If this is a text box or something that holds a value, based on your answer of question number 3, the 4th question is going to come up. What is your value? If this happened to be a text box and it has some strings in it, like location or something, you're going to respond back with what that value is, so the system can announce it to the users. Now, 5th question. Use this thing a bit sparingly, because if the role answer to the question number 3 is not enough for you, if you have some custom controls, if you can't able to explain what the role is very clearly using one of the traits that you get, the roles that you get for question number 3, you can use this hint to explain a bit more what that role that this particular element plays. But I wouldn't suggest you guys to rely too much on it, because when we are running some user testing, we found out the experienced user turns this off. They basically skim through. So basically use those top 4, try to answer what that element does it is. But if it is not enough, then use that question number 5, answer that question number 5 to tell what the system, what that role is. The 6th one, this is mainly for if your designer is giving you some custom controls, that's when you use this, right? What you need to do for that is, it basically asking you where this control is on the screen. So you basically respond back by giving a rectangular position on the screen. This is where I am. So that's mainly for custom controls, because if you use the system provided controls, even though you can do all kind of decorations to it, the UI framework will do most of the heavy lifting for you, and it does it for you. So that's all it is. 6 questions. That's all you need to answer. No matter how complex the UI the designers are giving you, you can still make it accessible by thinking in that 6-question framework. So it's very simple. There is no excuse for iOS developers not to make their apps accessible, because it's super simple. I feel sorry for my Android engineers. They have to work so hard, because she pulls down all the information from BBC and other places to find out, work out what it is, because different AEMs do so many things. So iOS engineers, no excuse. Got to make it done. Now, Since I use these 6 questions as a framework, as a mental model for me, I basically do manual testing when I'm trying to verify things, right? But I do use one particular tool if I was investigating some code that was given to me to find out, or if there is some custom control that is really, really crazy, if I need to find out what it is, this particular tool is the one that I'm going to use. I'm going to explain the tool using this sample app that I built. This is actually a simulator running my sample app. I got 2 buttons over there. One button in the red is not accessible, whereas the other button is accessible. All right. How do you access this tool? You need Xcode for that. You can also do that on the iPhone with the simulator accessibility inspector on, but the tool is buried in the Xcode over here in the Open Developer Tools. You access that from that menu over here, and then you can see the accessibility. You just select that, and it will bring up this particular tool, and this is the tool that you're going to get. It's very simple, nothing fancy in it. You can see those 3 values over there. I'm going to talk a bit more about it a bit later. Those are the answers that we have given to those 6 questions. Only 3 are over there because that's more than enough for it to make a system accessible. Now, here is the one. I picked the simulator over here by selecting that drop-down menu. And this cross wire, once I select that, it allows me to investigate the elements on the simulator. So here is the tool running side by side next to each other. Here's the accessibility inspector, and here's the simulator. And now I'm investigating this not accessible button over there. So I selected it, so it put the tool has put a green box around it. And this area, I just expanded out for you over here. So you can see that here, even though I'm not provided any label, the UI accessibility framework has tried its best to lift what the name it can give it to you. So based on the text that here I'm not accessible, it just provided that value. So the UI accessibility framework works really, really hard to lift most of the work for you, even though you didn't do that. So that's the first thing. But you can see that this is obviously not a value type, right? This is actually a button. So value is obviously going to be nothing in there. But you can see that tried. This is what we call it as roles. This is a try. This is also empty. This is not set. Identified is something that I'm going to talk to you later with, but I'll tell you what it is. So the next thing is this one, right? Now, when I have actually provided the button what these values are, when I select that, you can see the trieds coming out. And I didn't change any values for this because you can provide this value whatever you want. I let the framework to lift what it wants to be there. And this identifier is really an interesting thing for us developers because it allows us to write automation tests. So if you are not doing for accessibility, do it for automation. Our software verification engineers use these values to make sure our features are working. They use this to do their regression testing, automated regression testing. So that's what the role this identifier plays. In addition to providing accessibility, it also gives us the benefit of adding automated tests over there. So that's how I test in iOS. Now, bye.
Thank you, Arun. So let's talk about Android, how Android OS handles the accessibility features. So slightly different from iOS. Android OS provide a set of accessibility services and another set of accessibility API. So built on top of accessibility services, Google and Samsung and other ODM companies have already built a lot of tools for us. So people who need these tools use these tools to use our app. So in order to make our apps can be used by these tools, we need to implement a set of accessibility APIs. This is how we do the work for Android. Actually, Google has already provided us a very detailed accessibility guidelines for all the developers. So you just follow the rules, every rules in that document, you are safe. But let's have some example. So the first example I'm going to share with you is the touchable area. So in Google Android accessibility guidelines, say every button, every area that can be touched, at least 48 by 48 dp. So it's not only for the button. So why we have this? You might think, why we have this? Imagine some people have really big fingers, and that's my daddy. So he might rarely touch the buttons on my app I built. So if you follow these rules, he will never touch any other buttons close to the one you want him to touch. So that's the reason. But sometimes we build interactions not only on the button, we still build interactions, for example, on the text view or on some certain layout. So just to make sure every touchable area, at least 48 by 48 dp. And another example, which is a color contrast. So every time we talk about colors, you might think, oh, you just want to build a beautiful app, right? You just want to build a beautiful UI, but it's not only for that. Yes, we need beautiful UI, right? But let's think about people with low vision, might not be able to see it clearly, right? We still need to consider the situation. So have a better color contrast for your app. And in another case, everybody can use our app. Sitting on the grass, under the sunshine, right? You really need the color contrast to make sure everybody under the sunshine can see your app, can use your app. And this is my favorite example, which is a customized component. So if you build your app with standard Android components, you are safe because Android system know what it is. But if you build your app with customized layout, customized components, the system might not be able to know what is that. So if you want, for example, if user use TalkBack, which is a screen reader, use your app, they might not be able to know, is it a button, it can be touched, or it is anything other. So in order to make Android system can pick up it's a button, we need to tell system with this API, content description, very simple one, right? Tell the system what's the role it is. And thank you, next. And the order, which is, very simple one, order. API is simple as well. If you want to put an element next to another and next to another, you just use the API traverse before and traverse after. But when we need to adjust the order, the user feedback comes again. So what's going on that user feedback? So after developer have finished the UI, and people use screen readers, talkbacks, to read through, to navigate between the elements, all the elements have a default order. So what's going on here? So what you can hear from the talkback, navigate through the app, you will hear, close button. Have you been enjoying this app? Not really. Yes. Think about, is that the right order we want user to hear? No. No, we don't want. So what's the purpose of having this feature? So we want to encourage the people who like our app to vote for us, right? We want the people who don't like our app to give us feedback. We don't want to encourage them just to close it, right? Yeah, this is the right order. So then we twist the order a little bit. So you will hear things like this. Have you been enjoying this app? Yes. Not really. Close button. So that's the order we want, right? OK. So this is other examples I want to share with you. And you might wondering how we can test the things, your apps in Android. Next one, Gerry. So here are the testing tools I really want to share with you. The first one is the menu tool. So for example, in your Pixel phone, it's called TalkBack. If you are using Samsung phone, it's called Voice Assistant. So just simply turn on this tool to feel it to test your app. And if you don't like the menu thing, there's one called Accessibility Scanner, which you can download from Google Play, which can scan use this app to scan every screen of your app. So it will give you detailed suggestions, what is missing in your screen, what can be done better. So another tool, which is the Android Link for developers. So we are using Android Studio in ABC to build the Android apps. So there is a built-in tool called Android Link. So for developers, you can simply just run this tool to check your source code. So this tool can scan your source code and give you every detail of your layout, what's missing there, and then what else you can do. I think that's all for Android.
I want to finish off with a story that happened here. This happened 3 months into my job, 3.5 years ago. It was an afternoon. I saw my manager doing something wrong, and then he sent me an email. Can you have a look at this? Can you try to reproduce this issue? I can't. I tried to reproduce the issue, and I can't reproduce the issue as well. The thing about this email that struck me really well, I really don't remember what sort of operation that this lady has gone through, right? She uses two apps, two news apps, to get the information she wants, right? And one of the app is our app, and it broke it. Our app working with accessibility, and she can't use it. So we tried all the different combinations in the accessibility settings, and we still couldn't able to reproduce it. A few other people in the team tried and did it. So we ring her up. We got the number. It's actually her daughter number. So we picked her up the phone, and we ring her up, and we find out how she's using the app. And you can sense this, right? When you're on the call, you can sense this, right? To convey that information, how she's actually using the app. She depends on someone, right? There's no freedom there. But when she's using her app, there is a freedom, right? She can move around without anyone's help. That's it. That time, our team realized, without us realizing, the work that we are doing is making an impact on people's life. So even though you develop a thing that this is just accessibility, no, it's not. Someone, somewhere, relies on it. Their life depends on it. So make sure your app is accessible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Arun and Wei. That was great. Hardly a week goes by that one of these guys or another one of the developers or designers at the ABC doesn't come up to me with some idea about, how we can do something with those questions. What if? What if we did this? How about we do something like this? Do you think that it would fix the problem if we did this? And I love and absolutely relish the approach that people within the ABC take toward creating experiences that everybody can use. And I'm looking around at a number of faces that contribute to that now. So I'm going to open up the floor to questions.
Hi, my name's Alice. I was a little curious. A few slides ago, you had the feedback form, the assistive technology accessible version of it. You flipped the order of the two buttons, and I was really curious why that was.
Do you want me to take the question?
I'm curious why the equivalent experience for the non-sighted user was to flip the order of the buttons compared to the reading order. As a sighted user, I would read them left to right. And then you flipped it so that the right-hand button was read first.
If I can jump into that, is that okay? Yeah. That's an example of the way that we might go about creating a situation that could mimic the experience. It's not necessarily designed to be the ultimate experience that we would go for, but in that case, it's more about the principle of what we would do, which is that we can manipulate the experience to ensure a screen reader user does get an equivalent experience. That's really what it's all about. I wouldn't take necessarily the value there at face value. Okay, I think in that case for me it was probably more the close button. having the close button read first is really, it's not going to be an ideal situation. So it's similar to a dialogue box, I suppose, where somebody has gone into that dialogue box. We'd like people to read the information before being presented with a way out of that box. Okay, so, it's more a situation to demonstrate how we can control the situation to ensure that we've got the best user experience possible for everyone, however that might be.
Thank you.
Question about the live video streaming, the tab which you showed. I've done a few apps with accessibility, and my understanding, I might be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong. Usually the accessibility flow goes from left to right and top to bottom. And if that's the case, how would the user actually skim through just the left portion? Because that's the use case which you gave us.
The question is, the accessibility system flows from left to right. There are two things over there. First thing was, the user was not actually using the voiceover. So if you're using voiceover, it will scan from left to right. But what this user is using is, she's only using the zoom feature of it, and she's still reading through it. She's not a completely blind user. She's a low vision user, so she can still see things, but she just needs things to be a bit more enlarged.
Makes sense.
First thing. And second thing is, the way we implemented is using collection views. So collection view in iOS is a little bit different. It doesn't come with any accessibility takeover for you. So you need to group them as a container, and then you need to answer those questions. So it's not going to scan left to right with the way we implement it. It's gonna see that whole cell as one big block. So there are two things over there. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, what we were finding was that people who had the Zoom feature on, sorry, I don't know who was asking the question. Hi. Were actually having a bit, like this particular woman was looking at the screen like that to see what was on the screen, but then turning the Zoom feature on and looking like that to see what the actions might be down the left. And she needed to see the play button and the beginning of the text or the label together in that view to make it practical for her. Otherwise, she had to jump across like that to play it. So that was part of the answer. Is that okay?
Thank you. Thanks, Emma.
Hi, I'm Harriet. I just had a question about your usability testing. How do you find people to test your products across a range of abilities, or do you rely on your users providing you with that feedback once it's been launched?
Gerry, do you want to take this? How do we recruit?
Yeah, sure. We're actually looking at a few ways of doing it. We initially tried some of the traditional agencies, and we did have trouble finding people through traditional agencies. There is an agency that we have just started using that does provide information. I would certainly suggest having a chat with, I'd probably have a chat with Sarah actually. Sarah's with Utopia, and she can probably give you some information there. We are also looking at doing some recruiting through social media, so there are a few channels that we are looking for user research of a range of different apps at the moment. I hope that answers the question.
Hey, my name's Matilda. Just going back to the 6 questions you mentioned for iOS, number 5 was a hint.
Yep.
Which you suggested not to rely on too much. But do you have any examples of when was a good time to use that, or when would one need to use that?
I basically push my designers to stick to standard controls, don't go custom. It's only when we go custom, and if the control looks really, really weird. So I still stick that hint in everywhere, just a bit more explanation of what it is, but I still don't want people to completely rely on it because people turn it off. It's only gets valuable if the control is totally custom, and you just by with the frame or whatever it is, or it got like 5 triads or 12 triads or something, button, text, value changing, and there are a few triads available in the if you look at the Apple developer, they got a bunch of values that you can provide for the roles. If those things are not able to explain what it is, then only I will do what the hint is. But yeah, does that answer your question? Thank you.
Do you mind if I just extend that a little bit?
Yep.
Okay, if we're familiar with HTML, one thing that the guidelines will recommend, will suggest is quite fine, is to put a title attribute on a link to give information about that link. It's something that we don't recommend because it's not honoured by all screen readers universally. And so what that means is that somebody may get the information about that link. They'll just get the link text, but the link title will be ignored in some situations. So we don't want to rely upon it. It's okay to use it to embellish or to add additional information, but you don't want to rely on it. I think it's a very similar example here.
Yeah, something came into my mind. Just see if I can find it for you.
Yep. So a form field, you're better off putting a label on the form field rather than extending it with a hint and including valuable information in that hint. Pretend that the hint is supplementary, but it's unreliable.
So controls like this, these are like totally custom control that Apple has done for it. So these cases, it is just not very clear. Is it a slider? Is it a button? What it is? You know what I mean? Those kind of crazy controls, when you come in there, you just add that hint more. Thanks.
And another question? Yep, great.
So this is another general accessibility UX related question. So, obviously, I think you had a few lists in your examples, and also a few swipe gestures. Mobile devices are quite heavy on the gestures. So with lists, particularly these days, you have the vertical scrolling, but you also have nested scrolling where you could swipe horizontally. Now, is this sort of layout something that can be adapted to be made accessible, or would you need a separate, layout hierarchy to specifically deal to specifically be an alternative to that sort of list?
In iOS, one of the things that I do in those vertical navigation, horizontal navigation, it's actually a pain because of 3-finger swipe gesture moving back and forth is always a pain. You can provide containers.
Okay.
So you group those things together as containers, and then you can provide a list of accessible items inside as an array. So you would have 2 containers, one big container with whichever the scroll it is, and then inside, if you have a vertical scroll, one of the element that it is returning back as an accessible element is also a container. And that container has nested accessible elements inside. So in each of these containers, I will try to answer those 6 questions. So that's how I try to achieve accessibility on that, but it is a real pain.
So would they understand that they have to swipe horizontally, like if somebody is visually impaired, like blind, for example, or do they go to a separate screen?
One of the things that you can say in those things is like you announce where they are, page 1 of 1, page 2 of 2, page 3 of 3. And iOS is pretty good. When they actually reach the end, it makes a noise.
Okay.
They're telling them that there's no more to navigate. So that kind of thing, that's how you approach it.
All right. I'm actually an Android developer, but I would imagine that sort of principle can be applied.
So in Android, it's the same situation. So we're trying to avoid the 2 gestures happening in one layout. So if that happens on the design, talk to your designers to say if we have better solution for that. If we don't, try to separate them as much as we can. And actually, we have one example in our app as well, and it works for Pixel phone. But when I try on Samsung phone, it doesn't work because the layout, however it overlaps. So yeah, it's a pain point.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I was just curious. You showed the slidey, circly thing on the iPhone a second ago. How have you looked at how that is actually exposed, or did you write that, or how's that exposed?
No, I didn't write it. So one of the things I do is, this is what I do. If my designers comes to me and then show me this is, to find out how this is accessible, first thing I test is I go to these Apple native apps. So when you're talking about that thing, first thing came to my mind is I did exactly the same thing. Okay, is there anywhere that Apple native app does that? So yes, the clock screen is one of the things. So I go and I haven't actually tested it, to be honest. So basically I test it and then I see how the controls works in the Apple native apps, and then from there I'll try and work out how would they have implemented it. And if I can't figure out, I go to the developer forums, I ask some questions, how do I do it? And that's the process that I approach. But we haven't had any crazy controls so far yet, but that's the thing.
Out of curiosity, what app was that if I wanted to go poke at it?
Clock app.
Clock app.
Apple Clock app. They have the bedtime thing on it, so I'll show you for this, and
Thank
you
you
just
so much.
access that. Yeah, cool, thanks.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Hi, I'm Peace. I'm a UXer. It's kind of a two-part question. So I guess accessibility is, the ideal situation is to bake it in early, right, from the very start. But how would one go about retro-fixing something? And the second is, as a UXer, what are the kind of some of the resources where we could learn more about this topic?
Okay. I answer the second question. Do you want to go to the last slide, please? That's the link that I send them, the developer.apple.com/accessibility for iOS. That's where I send my UX engineers to, UX designers to have a look if you want to know more about these things. Yeah. They're pretty good. iOS is pretty good. You don't need to go and look anywhere else. You just go over there, you get all the details you want for iOS.
The Android one, actually, you can check the material design guidelines for that's especially for the UX designers. So there has all the details you can refer, or just contact us if you have. Why not?
Cool, thank you.
Sorry, are you asking from you've done it at the place where you work, where you're retrospectively trying to apply accessibility, or is this coming from?
I guess we're trying to do it right now. Trying to retro-fix some of, not so much, yes, around apps, but also just our software and websites and all the other stuff as well.
Have you got a backlog process at the moment? Do you have a backlog of items?
Yes, we do, yes.
Okay.
Yes, we do.
I guess, you read more there, but I guess, you have to put on your backlog and you have to approach it from, your priority perspective and put it in your sprints and go through it and try to incorporate as much as possible. A lot of, I guess from a digital agency's perspective, a lot of them force an audit once they're ready to almost go live. And the consequence of that is that you're forced into this time frame of if the client can afford an audit, a huge list of issues for which then the client will deprioritize a whole bunch of accessibility things which just can't make it into the go live release date, and they compromise and they put a bunch in that gets worked on before it goes, and it's really not ever the ideal situation. But if you can incorporate as much as possible and maybe a phased release to make sure you get through it, that would be recommended.
Cool. Thanks.
So for the developers, if you are retrofitting, the first two, retrofitting is actually a pain, but if you are, Sarah knows, because I worked with Sarah when we were retrofitting with the new staff in the very beginning. So iOS is pretty simple, right? I just still use that 6-point framework for me, whether these controls answers those questions. And if I find some controls, you can actually go and look at the code, whether they have implemented those 6 functions to tell you what it is, right? That's what I do. And if I can't find it, and if it is like really too much for me to dig it out, then I jump into the tool that I showed you, the accessibility inspector, that I run it on the simulator, and then I tap on those elements. That gives me a lot of information, and it tells me about the hierarchy of how the controls are placed as well, and I can group those things. So those are the 2 things I rely on. I ask those 6 questions, do they answer that, and then I jump into the accessibility inspector if it is really the pain point. So.
Great. Great. All right, thanks for that. Just to add a little bit to that as well, if we're after general resources about accessibility, one great resource that Microsoft puts out is the Microsoft Inclusive Toolkit. Inclusive takes you through some of the fundamentals of what we should be doing with all of our digital products in order to make sure that they are as usable as possible by the majority. And it's a really clean, nice kit to use. Some other resources that you might want to consider are the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines have been updated from WCAG 2 to WCAG 2.1. Some of the newer updates include some recommendations for the mobile space. So you want to look at that too. Is there anything else that you can think of? The BBC did a fantastic job a couple of years ago of what they call the Future Media Guidelines, which the BBC have been pushing out all types of digital content, web content, mobile content, that sort of thing. When it comes to checking, there are a range of different resources out there to help you check your web pages. The Wave toolbar is a fantastic tool for doing quick checks of accessibility. Documents, Acrobat will provide you with some really quick checks as well. So there are a range of resources out there. Yep, one more quick one, very quick.
Literally, just to add to your list, one of the tools that I'm really interested in is automated testing tools.
Sarah.
I think you're talking about CI, sort of continuous integration, yeah. So Axe is probably the one that is freely downloadable to use. It's got a whole lot of variants of, I think, Selenium and that kind of thing. So that has a whole, I guess, yeah, it has the tests that can be automated, noting that sort of the statistics usually show that's only about 20% of the criteria that we need to test with, but it's still, for me, it's easy pickings. You know, it's stuff that should actually be, your code should not be committed until those automated tests do pass. And then you can extend on them for your environment, so you can start to write environment-specific tests, sort of like what Arun showed you. If you know it's a button and someone comes and rips off that trait and suddenly it's not a button, you know, it should flag in the system, so that's great for regression testing as well. So CI tools, that one. Tenon is another one that does CI. PowerMapper SortSite has a CI option as well. They're probably the 3 CI tools that I know off the top of my head.
Or it might also be worth looking to Access Lint for GitHub, which does like code level linting, so you don't even have to render the web page. It just like tries to lint the actual code.
All right, look, that's great. Thank you very much. Thanks for the great questions. Can we please thank Arun and Wei for a really fascinating presentation?
Thank you.
Thank you also once again to the ABC for hosting us. It's been fabulous. Thank you very much all once again for coming. Global Accessibility Awareness Day is coming up. It's on Thursday, the 17th of May. There's going to be an event. It will be, I've lost my notes, here we go. So Ali Bites is an event that happens every year. It's a series of lightning talks, which is designed to be I guess, an introduction and an awareness session for accessibility. It's great for us all to, I go every year, it's great fun. They have really nice food too, and pizzas and beers. Lightning talks, they go for about 10 minutes each. They're always really interesting, really informative. It's the sort of thing where you should come along, but bring your colleagues as well. Bring your designers, your developers, your product managers, your project managers. It's designed to introduce them to what accessibility and inclusive design is all about. It's really about spreading the word. So as I said, that's on the 17th. You can find out information either by going to the Meetup site, or you can go directly to alibytes.org, and that's A11Y bytes.org. I'd register fairly quickly because being Global Accessibility Awareness Day and AliBytes, it's likely to fill up. So.
We've already got about 120 registrations, so and I think the notification's been out about less than a week. So yeah, if you are wanting to come along or bring along your colleagues, I definitely do agree with Gerry. Probably get in early. Thanks.